Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog Season 2, Episode 10. And hope you're having a good day. I am recording this Wednesday morning, which means the patch notes and the patch rundown are out, but the patch isn't out yet. So we're doing that awkward moment where we're waiting to see what the results are and see what all lands. Right now, I'm trying not to tilt off the face of the earth because I've been reading a lot of the reactions to the patch notes, and there's definitely a lot of very exaggerated reactions, whether it be people believing now that emblem augments are going to go from 5.1 to absolutely must pick off of 20 extra AD, or people saying that, uh, Jinx is going to be the best champion ever printed, et cetera, et cetera. Definitely a lot of very hyperbolic reactions, and it's funny because I'm not even supposed to be worried about live right now. I'm supposed to be focused on future land. I just can't help myself. I just want to make the game good, and definitely trying not to tilt though. But there are definitely a lot of strong feels. People play a couple of games on PBE to scrim, and they're like, nope, we've clearly solved everything. It's just okay, cool. So or how I explained even during the patch rundown, how I'm like, Ziggs is going to look impressive because he does a lot of damage on the damage meters. Into immediately everyone going, Ziggs needs nerfed. It's fine. It's fine. What I will say though is that there are a couple things I actually think people are right to call us out on. Like, for example, someone was like, yo, I think you've went way too hard on Tryndamere, especially with no Ash buffs. And that's one I actually agree on. I think I had wanted Tryndamere to get nerfed and Ash to be buffed. And the fact that the Ash buff couldn't make it due to the patch size means we are in this awkward state where I do think the Ash Tryndamere comp is going to be too weak. We'll see if that ends up being true. I think T-Hex is an example, though, where actually what's going to happen with T-Hex is you're not going to be able to force it or play it the same way you used to. But the way I used to play it at the beginning of the set, when it was uncontested, is actually going to be the thing that works, which will be hard to do, and they'll only be able to do it from certain spots. But when you pull it off, T-Hex will actually be quite good. So we'll see. We'll see. And I think, as with everything, it'll be this kind of thing where it's like, I couldn't play it the way I used to, therefore it's immediately very, very weak, right? Like, I fully expect T-Hex in the data to look as bad as it did at launch. Because again, people found one way to play it that was way better. But yeah. And so the other thing is that, one of the big things we couldn't change this patch was the unlock conditions. And so once those start to open up, right? Like, for example, I know we want to get Orianna to be a lot more accessible instead of having to high roll all 3 Piltover early, or, Warwick more accessible so that you don't have to have a 2-star Vi who is really contested, stuff like that. So I think as we open up more of the unlock system, that will also help things. And as Tim said in the rundown, I think 16.2 and 16.3 will end up being pretty big patches. But if everything goes right, because the nice thing is we do have a nice baseline. And that's the thing I think, if you really want to think about where things are supposed to be, I keep going back to compare to your baselines, right? So if the baseline for cost is Lysandra, right? Does AD Kaisa buff put her at Lysandra levels? If so, great, we did it. If it buffed her too much, we'll pull it back, right? But we've got some really good baselines in the set right now. Volibear, I think, is a really good baseline 5 cost. So it's is Ziggs just that much better than Volibear? If so, then we should probably, adjust it. Et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's kind of what's on my mind, which is tough because, again, I'm not supposed to be thinking about live right now. I'm supposed to be focused on future land. We've got some big tasks for me in the immediate future. Today I have a couple 2-hour plus meetings to deal with some of these things. Obviously being vague because I have to be, but a lot of work. It's definitely came back sprinting. Definitely didn't start slow. So yeah. All right. Well, I did write down 5 questions. I don't know if I'm going to get through all these, but let's go over them. The first question is actually a really deep question, so this might take a lot of the time. But basically, the question was, can we protect the set launch discovery phase? And the person is asking about the set comes out for the first 2 weeks, and there's this like race to put guides, whether it's like TFT Academy or the data that comes out and things like that, and everyone's rushing to find the answer. And, is there a way to protect that so that actually for the first 2 weeks, people have to explore the game? Because let's be real, for a lot of people, the start of every set is the most fun because nobody knows what they're doing. And in fact, I'll even pick on TFT Academy a little bit. For all, the guides and whatever the tier list they put out there that everyone uses, they also thought T-Hex was E tier, so like, again, they're a representative of what is, and that's why I always keep saying data is what is. But going back to the question is like, is there a way we can protect this? Is there a way we can stop this? So that's the question. Now, this is a really interesting thing because what you have to do is you have to look outside TFT, right? Like TFT is one game, but there are many, 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 many examples of games, right? You could look at card games like Magic and Riftbound. You could look at competitive games like, League of Legends or any fighting game or whatever. Like just look at all the different games. And what I will tell you is that you cannot stop the spread of information. That is just an impossible thing that cannot be done, right? Like even if we disabled data, right? Like one of the things we talked about when we talked about augment data being disabled was like, what if we literally did just disable end of game screen? And so no one could get any data. It doesn't matter, right? Like people will still communicate. And the proof you have of this is simply something like a CCG, right? Like CCGs don't have data that they can compile, but what they can do is look at like tournament results, right? And they can have, matchups, and they can lab. I think Pokemon is actually a really good example of this. Like Pokemon doesn't have data that you can access, but is still a competitive game. And people will show up with like what movesets are working. There will be the popular belief. There's the meta. There's what counters the meta, right? And like not having the data does slow that process down, which is good. But even a game like Pokemon, day one, people will be like, these are the OP ones, these are the things, whatever. Now, the thing that not having data does that I actually really like is the fact that like it allows you to discover something no one else did, right? Like imagine if the T-Hex guide hadn't been put out there. What would happen actually is like a player would have played that, probably gained 1,000 LP, and then someone would have noticed on the leaderboard, like, wait, what are they playing? That T-Hex icon on tactics.tools doesn't look like everyone else's icon of Kindred and Senna and whatever. Holy cow. And then like that's how it gets discovered. Because that's a common thing that happens when a guide's not written. But the other thing that's important about this is the audience of our game. And so one of the things this question implies is that for everyone, if you blocked this information somehow, the game would be better. But that's actually not true. Certainly for like a player like myself, it's very true. Like I would love that personally, and I would even go so far as to say 50%-ish or more of our audience would agree with you. But there's also a large portion of our audience that can't be neglected, that like to them what is fun is the information coming in, absorbing the information and learning about the game and finding a way to master it quickly, right? Like again, this is true of a CCG or a fighting game, for example. It's like people want to spend time in the lab, master their moves, get in there and go quick, not run into some like obfuscation that blocks all that information. And so if there's no information available, you actually would isolate a part of your audience as well. And so that's why we've actually tried to, with a lot of the things I do in TFT, for better or worse, are like treading the line between multiple audience types, right? Like the base game is all about being a fun, casual game that you can play that has some variance, but with enough depth and skill expression to be appealing to core players, right? Like it's trying to do both. The same would be true here with the data. It's like, yeah, we got rid of augment stats so that it wasn't just like a literally the data tells you everything to do, but having some information and some guides out there is good. a lot of people are able to learn and like a new player starts set 16. They're like, I don't know what to do. Having sites like TFT Academy helps them. They understand like, oh, that's interesting. I see that they're putting Kraken on Yunara and IE on Yunara. Why is that important? Oh, I understand because of the like. It allows them time to learn. Hilariously enough, I'll even go all the way back to when I was a kid, and N64 time, Ocarina of Time, Mario 64, that general era, and whenever I couldn't play video games, like my parents would be like, no more, you've had enough, whatever, I would read the player's guides. And the player's guides would be like how I would absorb information. Because it's like, if you're interested in the hobby and you want to keep learning about it, it's the same kind of thing. So imagine you can't play TFT for a bit and you want to like read up on the guides. This is where I think like Reddits and Discords are serving that purpose nowadays. And saying, hey, for the first 2 weeks, sorry, no information sharing, I think is really dangerous. I think for a lot of people, they'd be like, this game is now an insurmountable knowledge thing that I don't want to learn on my own. So I quit, I'm not going to play. I think that's harmful to, if our goal is to have as many players enjoy TFT as possible, and that is one of our primary goals, then I think blocking all of that data is incorrect. As much as I, as a player, would prefer it, that's not the goal, right? The goal is not make the player happy. The goal is have as many people enjoy TFT as possible. And for a lot of players, having that information is good. It's one of the reasons why, as much as I still believe augment data should be hidden, I do not believe augment tier lists should be hidden. I think augment tier lists are great. I think the discussion around why people believe an augment is good and not is great, right? Like having those conversations to engage in the game and talk about the game and things like that is very healthy. But what isn't healthy is when people believe there is a mathematical answer that dictates all possible answers, right? And this is actually one of the things I actually don't like lately is like item deltas. It's like, no, you must play exactly IE Kraken, Ginsu's, Yunara, and any other item build is absolutely griefing, right? Like that sends the wrong message to players because actually item economy comes into play. You don't always have best in slot, etc. That sends the wrong message. So all of this is to say that I believe you cannot block information sharing at the start of a set. As much as certain player archetypes like myself might like that, I do not think you can do that. I think that actually would limit our audience and block out a lot of people who will enjoy TFT and go deep on it from getting into TFT, which is really dangerous. But I do think there is something about the information being shared that we need to figure out how to have people communicate in a way that doesn't speak in absolutes. But that's fighting human nature, and I'm not a psychologist or can't do that. There's no way I'm ever going to make that true, right? Again, at the beginning of the set, everyone told me I was crazy for saying Piltover was good. Everyone told me I was crazy. I'm like, no. Pretty sure T-Hex is OP. I mean, I literally remember sitting in the hotel room in Paris going, look, man, I'm telling you T-Hex is good. We can buff it, and I know, but because no one's playing it, but it's good. Fast forward to, it turns out a 1-star T-Hex can delete entire board. Again, but everyone spoke in absolutes, and it's just one example of many. But, I've watched and read a variety of things. X is bad until it isn't bad, and then it's good. And again, players don't have that accountability, blah, blah, blah. I'm going off topic back to the first topic. But anyway, all of this is to say is the original question was, can we protect the set launch discovery phase? I don't think any more than we have already. And I will also say that this patch, it was a 5-week patch, 3 weeks of just the C patch, even shows that as much as it was solved, there was still developments at the top level, right? Bilgewater, for example, the way to play Bilgewater kept evolving over time until eventually people figured out Graves is good and stats buying is actually good and it's a tempo comp, not a save all your... Bilgewater had a lot of developments itself. Even Demacia had a lot of developments and itemization around Vayne and things like that. So as much as the information is out there, that doesn't mean it's solved, right? And so just because you see a TFT Academy tier list on day one of the new set doesn't mean that's correct, doesn't mean that is the truth. And it always goes back to what I say, which is data only tells you what is currently believed to be true, not what is actually potentially true. And so that's just a mindset you have to get into. But I can't, again, I can't change everyone's mindset. That's not my job as a game designer. My job as a game designer is to give everyone the fun template that is the game to play and explore and dive into that. And I think Set 16 has done that. So, yeah, there you go. All right. That was a good question. Hopefully that was I feel strongly about it, but I'm also trying to not rant for 30 minutes. So, all right. The next question I actually feel really strongly about. I think we screwed this one up. The question was basically about spell crit description clarity. It's very unclear when spells require IE and when they don't. And the examples here were like Jinx and Draven and Tryndamere. It is not clear which ones require IE and which ones don't. And that's really confusing. I agree. I 100% agree. And I have a very strong stance, which I've shared with the live team. I don't know that we're going to be able to change it in time, but I will tell you my stance, and I feel very, very strongly about this. I believe that every single spell, every single one, 1000% in the game, should require IE, right, to crit. Like every single one. So like using your Jinx, Draven, and Tryndamere example, I believe all three of those should require IE for them to crit. Draven's axes should not crit without IE. Jinx's missiles after she casts her spell should not crit without IE. And Tryndamere during his 5 seconds of enrage, those auto attacks should not crit without IE. That is what I believe is true. It would be consistent. Every single spell, that should be true. The only exception, and I say that in parentheses because it's not actually an exception when you think about the rules, would be a champion like Set 3 Xayah. Set 3 Xayah simply says, gain 50% attack speed for 6 seconds, right? That means she's still autoing. The auto attacks are still autoing. All she did was buff herself. Therefore, she's still autoing. Those should crit just fine. If the spell said, gain 50% attack speed and do 30 extra damage, what should actually happen is it should be rewritten to be a lot like Tryndamere, where it says replace your autos with a spell auto that does more damage, and then that should require IE, right? Like there's something about when we make these spells that we should be very, very clear that this is a spell now and spells require crit, or this is simply a self-buff, and the auto attacks are still the auto attacks, right? Another example would be if I made Tryndamere, another Tryndamere, I'm making a brand new Tryndamere, and it just says for 5 seconds, deal 40% more damage. That should be able to crit, right? Because all it did was give you a buff of stats, but you're still just auto-attacking. So that's the only exception in my mind. And I think we have to do a better job of making sure that is still true, because that's the only way to remove all of that confusion. So that is my current belief. Are we there yet? Nope. I think there's a couple that have been confusing. Definitely need to align with the team on that, but that is what I believe should be true. So, all right. What is the role of 3 costs, particularly 3-star 3 costs? And what is their role? When is it a healthy meta that 3-star 3 costs are actually viable? This is an interesting one that I've actually changed my mind on a little bit recently. Because back in the day, what I used to say was a 3-star 3 cost should be as strong as a 2-star 5 cost. If you go back to on my stream when I had that notification, and that they're the kind of thing that if you can get, great, but they should be really strong. I think that was incorrect. And the reason I think that was incorrect, the part, I've talked about this before, but the axis I undervalued was when can you get them? I think it's important to say, because the gold cost-wise, maybe sure, those two should be equal. But the time that you can get them has to be factored in. And I have seen 3-star 3 costs on 3-2, 3-3, those are insane high rolls. But even on a non-high roll, like you can see them on like 4-1 pretty standardly with a couple augments, a couple lesser duplicators. It's not that insane to hit a 3-star 3 cost on 4-1. 3-star 3 costs are coming online sometimes sooner than 2-star 4 costs. Not often, but sometimes. And because of that part of the equation, I do think they have to be less powerful than a 2-star 5 cost, which is usually much harder to come online. And normally you don't see those come online till like 4-2 at the earliest, ignoring a few like insane cases. But more likely is closer to like 4-5, 5-1, right? And so it's if two things are equal, but one comes online much, much sooner, you're going to play the thing that comes online much, much sooner. Like this, always, that's true. And so 3-star 3 costs cannot be as powerful as 2-star 5 costs. I think I was incorrect in that assessment over time. Now, the question is, what is the role of them? Obviously, 3 costs inherently. 3 costs should be the kind of thing that, like, if you get early game, you're excited by, right? A 3 cost out of an orb should always be a sign of like, ooh, I could play around this, right? The reaction I want you to have when you get an Ari from an orb is, ooh, this should be a really good carry. I believe 3-star 1 costs should be better than 2-star, 3 cost 1 star should be better than 1 cost 2-star. Again, just by availability. So an Ari should be better than, an Ari 1 should be better than a Sona 2, assuming equal items and traits and things like that. Like, that is what I believe, like, ooh, this is like a nice early to mid-game carry. It gets me through there. When I 2-star it, that should get me to like stage 4-2. Awesome. Like, that's a good thing, right? Like an RE2 should be able to get you to that 4 cost section. Now, from there, it gets a little tricky. I still believe, and this is something that, again, I think we kind of messed up over time, is that being able to force like an RE3 should not be something you always are able to do, right? Like the correct call, if you're running, let's say you've got exactly 3 Aries, you're at 100 health, it's 4-1, and you're level 7 with 60 gold, and you've saved up, right? Like, you've done everything right, and you've got this Ari, and you're good to go. I do not believe the correct play should ever be sit there and roll at 7 for RE3 when you only have 3 copies of Ari. I believe if you had 5 copies of Ari, or 6 copies of Ari, or 3 copies of Ari and 2 lesser duplicators, okay, that's when it should be true. And that should be the like determining thing that says, hey, should I move away from this Ari and into a Lysandra or an Annie or whatever? Or should I roll for the Ari? I believe there have to be outside factors to make that decision for you. But what we've done over time is actually said, no, it's totally fine if you just re-roll for the Ari, and players expect to hit it when they only have 3 copies. That, I think, has been kind of a mistake. I think the default thing should be to move away from 3-star 3 costs. And so I think we're not that far off. We're close. I think right now 3-star 3 costs are definitely underpowered compared to like your T-Hexes, Unaras, et cetera, et cetera. But again, like if I compare RE3 to Lysandra 4 or Lysandra 2, they're not that far off, and I think that's actually pretty close. But it's been more that trying to communicate to players that, like, again, you're not always supposed to be like, I have an RE2, time to re-roll Ari, right? Communicating that there has to be that external factor, I think, is our next challenge, and making that clear. So that, I think, is the tough thing. So to answer your question of like, what is their role? Their role is early to mid-game carries that take you into late game, or if an external factor elevates you to a spot where you have more than usual of them, you can consider re-rolling them as an alternative path to standard TFT play. That is the overall answer. And so the games where you get like lesser duplicators, heroic grab bag, whatever, and find a lot of REs, those are the games where the RE3 should really shine. And when they do, they should be slightly better than 2-star 4 costs. Slightly, but still not as good as a 2-star 5 cost. Again, assuming everything else surrounding them is equal. I had some confusion yesterday because I talked about it on Reddit where I was like, T-Hex and Set should be about equal in terms of like power and their compositions. And someone was like, wait, those two champs shouldn't be equal. T-Hex is harder and bigger. Like, I don't literally mean T-Hex and Set should be doing equal damage on the damage meters. What I mean is if you have a set comp that you've put together with a Set and a comp you've put together with a T-Hex and like they're both 2-star and everything around them is equal, then it should be pretty darn close and, go from there. So, yeah. All right, this video is already long enough. I'm going to answer one more question that's really short here. Are some spell traits augments meant to test future system mechanics? I wanted to answer this one because it's really short. The answer is no, but not in the way that you think. We never have this, like, what doesn't happen is anyone is like, hey, for set 19, I have this brilliant idea, but to make sure it's good, let's do a light version in set 17. That has literally never happened in TFT's history. Instead, what actually happens is the opposite, where it's like, I have this silly idea. Let's try it in 17. Okay, that was cool. Players liked that. That worked. Let's expand on that in 19, right? Like, we'll do light things that are like, oh, that was cool. And then people will be like, wow, that really worked. Players liked it. I want to use it for my set also, right? KDA to Street Demon was not some like weird test. It was more just like, hey, having hexes is cool, right? Every idea is built off of an existing idea based on how much players enjoyed it and how successful we think it was. That's the more common paradigm. So like the person asking the question had brought up like Graves being like a test for melee champions. And it's like, well, no, actually what happened is someone just had a unique idea for Graves. And then we went, hey, cool, based on that Graves, we can test out how people like that, how it looks for like roles revamped, and then build on that. And so that's the more common practice is it's never long-term idea, let's test it. It's more like, let's test the thing, worked great. Very, very scientific method, which, fits here. Very scientific method of like, let's try a thing. It worked. It was great. Now let's build on it. Let's try a thing. Players hated that. Well, don't need to do that anymore, And so like, that's the common methodology. So, yeah. All right. That's it for today. Like I said, it's Wednesday. My day's full of long, important future land meetings. So be a weird day. And then tomorrow the patch launches. So tomorrow's Walk the Dog. What I'll probably be talking about is where did things land early on in the data? Are there, do we have to hotfix zigs or are all the emblem augments now 3.5s? I'll be interested to check that. I don't know that we'll have the augment data by the time I record the Walk the Dog though. But certainly what I will say is Monday's Monday morning meta report will be interesting because I think most of the topic I'll be talking about then will be sort of the accountability of like, how did the patch land? Which will be good because the last few Monday morning meta reports have been like, yep, T-Hex is still strong and Zon and Noxus still suck. Woohoo! So it'll be nice to actually get some more interesting conversations in those Monday morning meta reports. So, all right, that's going to do it for me. This has been episode 10. Here's to however many more. So, all right, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.